Well, welcome to 2018 and Cravon Studios' ShopTalk. This is something we're going to be doing that's a little new for 2018, where we're going to pick a game mechanic or something about designing games and kind of delve into the details of it and maybe give an introduction as well if you haven't done this before. So look forward to more of these and we'll see how we go here, right? So this first one, the one I want to talk about today, is area control. Now this is, it's been around for a while. When you think about it, Risk is an area control game. That's been around for quite some time. And I'll refer to Risk quite a bit because it's a mass market game. A lot of people have seen it or are familiar with it. And it tends to be a good example of this. But area control is a mechanism where you use your units to occupy a predefined area. And when you occupy that area, you will gain some benefit from it or even directly victory points from that area. There are occasions like in Risk or other games where when you move your units into the area, you instantly gain control. Now, it came up before where we talk about area control versus area influence. And one of the Facebook groups I belong to, we had a conversation about this because someone brought up chess as an instance of area control. And the premise was that chess is an area control game because you look at it from the perspective of all the area that the pieces can control. Like if a knight is there, you know what squares that it's covering, or a queen or a bishop, you know it's got the diagonals, or in the case of a queen, it's pretty much any direction and any distance, and that is their area of control. But chess is not an area control game. That area control view of chess is more about a strategy or a way to look at chess, not so much the mechanic in chess, which is a grid movement style game that uses piece capturing to defeat the enemy. Area control is where you have a predefined space on the board that you need to take control of in order to get those benefits. So for example, if you think about area influence, that would be the chess strategy, where there's an area of influence that those pieces have over the board. But actually controlling an area would require them to occupy the area and defend it against all assailants. So let's look at some of the other mechanics about area control. When you think about area control, it's actually almost never seen by itself. There is something that's in there that allows you to move your units into the area to take control of that area, or something that will allow you to kind of airdrop units into an area. El Grande is often brought up as an area of control game, and we can compare that with Risk in this aspect. So for example, in Risk, you will have your units, and they will be in one area. Let's say we're in Asia, and we have Afghanistan and Ural and China. You have to take your units from an area you already occupy and then move them into a unit you want to occupy, want to take control of, or into an area you want to take control of. Whereas in El Grande, you have your pool of knights or caballeros, and you will basically just put them into whatever area you want to, providing it's adjacent to where the king piece is currently sitting. So there's slightly different mechanics there. One is based on movement, whereas the other one is based more on being able to place your units anywhere, and they don't have to have originated from an adjacent area. Sometimes you will do like some kind of drafting mechanic or drawing from a dice bag. While Sagrada is not an area of control game, yeah, some people referred to it as that. So I wouldn't call Sagrada an area control game. But for other units like Risk, you will have that where you're going to be moving into an area. A lot of 4X games, which if you haven't heard of a 4X game, the 4Xs are explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. And when you think about area control, in order for you to exploit an area, you have to control that area. So you will expand into an area so you control it, and then you will exploit that area for resources or points or some mechanic. And then you will use that to hopefully exterminate your opponents. So the 4X games take advantage of this, excuse me, quite a bit. And if you look at areas like even Tiny Epic Kingdoms, you're going to explore into an area so you can gather the resources from it. But the Tiny Epic Kingdoms example leads us to another aspect of area control. And I kind of consider this a subcategory of area control, where you have area majority. Now, area majority means that you don't necessarily you're not the only one in control of that area. There may be multiple players with multiple pieces in this area, but the person with the majority of pieces in that area controls it or gains the benefits from that area. There are games that do this, such as Tiny Epic Kingdoms, where if two players occupy the same space at the same time and they're not at war, they can share those resources, where you will have two players sharing it, not have majority. When you compare this to something like Fate of the Elder Gods, where you'll have different cultists in there, and every player may have cultists in the same area, and you may have investigators in the same area, but it's the person with the most that has control of that area and gets the major benefit of the area. And when you think about Tiny Epic Kingdom, since you can only have two meeples in any one area, you can't have a majority control scenario. But it does lead us to shared control. Now, whereas in Risk, you want to be the only one in the area. You can be the only one in the area you're trying to control. So you won't have a shared control scenario. You won't have to deal with majority control scenario in Risk. With El Grande, you may have a scenario where there's multiple players in the same area, so it's a majority control. And then Tiny Epic Kingdoms leads us to a shared control area. Now, shared control is kind of a special circumstance. It doesn't happen as frequently as just area control does. But with shared control, you both gain the benefits of the area. In Tiny Epic Kingdoms, for example, if two meeples from two different players are in the same area or territory, and they are not at war, they have to be at peace with each other, they both get to collect resources from that area. So there's usually some kind of mitigating circumstance, like having to be at peace in order to do that. Now, when we think about these limits on control and shared control or majority control or even singular control, they may be temporary. For example, let's take Risk. In Risk, the idea is that you will have control of an area. You want it to be permanent control. When you move into a territory or into an area on Risk, you intend that to be permanent. But if you move out of that area, you lose control of that area. Okay? Whereas a temporary control element is kind of designed by the game. Fate of the Elder Gods, for example. You can gain temporary control of one of the locations on the board. And you do this by rolling the dice. If you roll the dice and it comes up in favor, in your favor, you will gain temporary control of that area for your turn. But as soon as your turn ends, you are no longer in control of that area. It is temporary by its nature. Whereas in Risk, when you control an area, you intend to maintain control of it. Otherwise, you don't get more troops and you can't strengthen your armies. Well, there's a semi-permanent control as well, which is Risk, where the intent is you want to keep it forever, you want it to maintain that control, but something that another player does or something the game does can change that. For example, if another player attacks you, they will be able to eliminate your forces, potentially eliminate your forces in an area, and you will lose control of that area. With Fate of the Elder Gods, even if you have majority control, if someone else moves more cultists into the location, they will gain control. So control is intended to be temporary in that scenario. It's intended to be permanent in Risk, but it may end up being temporary depending on the actions of other players. Whereas a permanent control is, it won't be changed. Tic-tac-toe, for example, when you put your X or your O in the location, it never changes for the duration of the game. Nothing can change that spot. That would be permanent control and indelible control. But that's one of the things that we can think about when we look at this idea of area control. So a few things about it that I think define area control are the areas are predefined. You don't define them by the movement of your pieces. For example, in the game of Go, the areas are not predefined. That's an area enclosure game where your placement of pieces defines the area you have enclosed. Area control games, the areas are predefined. You have to occupy those areas, and you must maintain occupation of those areas to gain some kind of benefit from those areas. The control can be shared if the game allows that, and it can be temporary, as in the case of Fate of the Elder Gods. It can be semi-permanent, as in the case of Risk, where you intend it to be permanent, but actions of another player can remove that, or permanent, whereas when you place your person or your meeple or your units in that area, nothing can change it. That would be a permanent control. So I think that pretty much defines area control and sums up what that is, what it means. Hopefully you will find these little tidbits interesting. If you're new to game design or new to games in general, maybe you'll learn something on the categories of games and the mechanics we use to create them. And hopefully it gives you a new perspective. Maybe what is an area control? Maybe you find you like that even though you weren't sure what that kind of thing was. So stay tuned for more of the videos. We'll be doing one of these every other week between our normal podcasts. And we hope to talk to you again soon. See ya.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Games on Tables is a member of the Boomer Radio Network and is produced by Rocky Heckman with the assistance of Dave Haldane. You can contact Rocky on Twitter at Cravon Studios. That's Cravon Studios. Like us on Facebook at Boomer Radio Network and tweet to us on @BoomerRN1. Be sure to check out our sister podcasts, and until next time, make awesome things.